Rowdy says, can we all agree that Val Kilmer was the worst Batman? Yeah, I would probably say you're right. Who do you think is worse than Val? Yeah?
Clooney was.
Oh, I forgot the nipples.
Super bad.
Yeah, he was cringeworthy. Yeah, and I always have a soft spot in my heart for Val Kilmer because of The Saint. I loved him in The Saint. That was a great movie.
And Willow, he was awesome as Mad Mardigan. When I was a kid, Mad Mardigan was like, it's like, holy crap, that dude's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think what made The Saint even better than a mediocre movie was the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack was just balls amazing.
All right, now I got to pull up the, let's see here, where'd my VMware go? What is on the Saint soundtrack? Let's see here.
Makeup Pimps, as I remember.
It's funny that I'm such a geek. I start, instead of typing ANA, I start typing Anantech. The Saint, let's see here. Orbital did the Saint theme? Wow, I didn't even remember the Sneaker Pimps. Yeah. Duran.
Yeah.
David Bowie. Whoa, oh, I remember that David Bowie song. This is a really good soundtrack. Okay. Yeah. Now we'll have to go and listen to that. I'll have to remember that. the things that come up during office hours. Nestor says Iceman. That's a good point. Top Gear. Val Kilmer's work in Top Gear. I don't know that it would qualify as amazing actor. Top Gun. Yes, that's again the geek thing. Yeah, Top Gun. Ooh, what a great movie.
I don't. It was a good movie. I just don't think he was that great in it. I think the whole everything else around made all the actors that much better. But the whole Iceman thing, he was very one-dimensional. I mean, I think it's the same thing to make Keanu Reeves good. Is don't let him talk very much, right? So every good Keanu Reeves movie or one that's at least enjoyable, he just doesn't have a lot to say because there's not a lot.
But he makes that same face. He's just always sort of mouth slightly open, turn of the head.
Like even The Matrix. The Matrix, he doesn't say much. Speed, he doesn't say much. Anytime you get him talking too much, it goes down south.
Are you saying that Speed is good even without Keanu Reeves talking?
It was such an amusing premise. It was really amusing. You stick people on a bus, you tell them to go fast. Sandra Bullock.
I'll watch Sandy do just about anything.
Yeah.
Watch her teeth if you put a camera in there.
Yes.
Like you could even give Keanu Reeves the worst lines, like in Much Ado About Nothing. I am a villain. And the whole movie will still be great, right?
Well, come on.
I think it's the same thing with
that the best Top Gun. Keanu Reeves movie is Point Break.
It is.
Just the scene where he yells, I am an FBI agent.
I am an FBI agent. Oh, that's so awesome.
Yes,
and Patrick Swayze. Yeah. Oh, that was funny as hell. Garland points out that the John Wick movies are awesome. Yes, they are.
Again, how much does he say?
Hardly anything.
Hardly anything.
Great effects. I just got done seeing John Wick 2 for the first time during the company retreat or leaving or going to the company retreat. Damn, I love that movie. Oh, Wick 1 was good. 2 is good.
Brent left dinner early to go watch John Wick 2 one. I'm out. And you go finish John Wick and fall asleep.
Early on my schedules, even earlier than most people could comprehend.
I'll tell you how early it was. Old people were still walking in.
Like my appetizer just finished, right? And it's like, geez, bye, Brent.
Adios. Let's get out of here. You would think that on the company retreat we go partying like crazy. No. Maybe the employees do, but I wouldn't know. I'm in bed by like 8:30.
It's funny. Someone asked, well, did you see the Northern Lights? And Lucy and I looked at each other. We're like, I don't even think we were on deck on that night. We didn't even make it.
It's really hard to see them from a cruise ship. It's really hard between the lights and the time of year. It's tough. Yeah. Oh, we got to write the blog post too about that.
I still have to upload my pictures.
Yeah, I'll go
do that when we're not on a webcast.
So, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to get your questions in. We will go ahead and get office hours started. Just ask any question that you like over in the questions and answer pane and go to webinar. We go through first come, first serve, and whatever we get, we roll with. Larry says, from a coworker, yeah, sure, Larry. Whatever, Larry. Can a database on SQL Server 2012 Service Pack 3 running in 2008 R2 compatibility mode participate in an availability group? I think so.
I would say yes.
Yeah, shouldn't matter.
Let's see. I have a more important question, though. What's stopping you from just trying it?
Do it live. That's what we always say at Brent Ozar Unlimited.
Well, I mean, not in prod, but, because, if you're embracing availability groups, then clearly you're embracing the pre-prod staging environment so you can test everything against an availability group. If you want to be a responsible availability group owner, you can't not have that staging environment.
And you can do it with one database with 1 gig. Just create a 1 gig database and see what happens.
Less than a gig even. It could be 512 megabytes.
Larry says, yes, I swear a coworker, I would have tested it myself. Good answer, Larry. We appreciate that. You pass.
Thanks, Larry.
Let's see here. Next up, JH says, a developer is getting the following error.
Ooh, boy.
He says, no one else is having problems, only him. ODBC, encryption not supported on the client. SSL provider, client and server cannot communicate because they do not possess a common algorithm.
Where are they? From Management Studio?
Management Studio and looks like also via his app via ODBC.
I ran into something kind of weird like that once, setting up mirroring, and I blogged about it. There was a problem when mirroring, like when I did mirroring by with the GUI, it set up 2 different encryption algorithms for some reason, and then that was a big reason why mirroring wouldn't work. But man, I got nothing on why Management Studio would do it. I would just make sure that you're on the most recent version of Management Studio and see if that fixes it and breaks everything else.
Uninstall, reinstall?
Yeah,
restart it.
Yes.
Peter says, I'm working on a server that's got 2 versions of SP Blitz Index. One is old from 2014 and one is current, 2017. The 2 differences have the 2 versions that report a lot of different stuff. Like the old one reports much more stuff. Why would an older version of SP Blitz Index report more stuff?
Oh, I think it's the default mode.
Yep.
Yeah. So with the new SP Blitz Index, you want to be running in mode 4 if you want the full Monty of errors and warnings. Mode 0 is kind of like a higher prioritized list of stuff. Mode 4 is like the deep dive into stuff. Mode 1, 2, and 3 are still the same though, where it's like the aggregate stuff, the current definitions, and then just missing indexes. But 0 and 4, well, I think 4 was new, right? Because 4 was...
I think it was new because I think before we just reported every tiny detail and people were freaking out.
Right.
Oh my God, I have a missing index on a table with 4 rows.
Yeah. I have a 4 heap. What's happening? You're like, I don't know, nothing.
Yeah. Who cares?
Or no heap. Stop.
Yeah. James says, I can't wait to see you guys at the PASS Summit 2017 your pre-con. Man, Erik has been working hard on his slide decks, and I am way behind. I blocked out. I think it's next week. Next week, I'm working on my pre-con decks.
I've been working.
Already blacked out for next week.
I'm blacked out. Yeah, I'm drinking so hard. I'm blacking out for next week. Richie, are you bitter that you're not going to Summit? Is that what it is?
I am. It's like the first time in like 4 or 5 years that I'm not going. It's kind of weird.
Well, at Halloween, you'll enjoy it with your kids. That'll be fun.
Yeah, no. I'm totally happy I'll be home, but it's one of those bittersweet things. It's like it's good to be home, but you kind of want to be around everyone else and doing all the everyone else things.
It's just that we figured out that you love your family more than you love us. We see how it is.
Yeah,
yes, and I'm still married, which is amazing. That's a good thing.
To your wife, not your job. Yes, that's the important part. Kevin says, I'm trying to install SQL Server for both standalone and clusters, and it's failing. I'm waiting on the database engine recovery handle. Any and all help would be appreciated. I bet you've got a bad download. I bet you've got a bad ISO file, because I've seen stuff like this happen when I had a corrupted ISO file that I downloaded or a corrupted cab. So I would just try downloading a fresh install to see if that gets you. Richard says, I have a number of reports on a reporting server. I need to back them up within the entire folder. Is there a way to back up my SSRS reports without doing them one at a time?
I have no idea.
Me neither. Who would we ask? Doug Lane.
Yeah.
Is it SQLtheater.com? I think it's SQLtheater.com. Let's go. Hey, I got a web browser. Let's go use my web browser.
DougLane.com?
Let's go look and see. And once we start pulling up things, we're going to pull entirely the wrong website up here. I think it's
SQLhater.com.
SQLhater.com. And so from there, you can contact Doug or not. Maybe it shows on the blog.
Twitter.
Twitter's
Or
always
Stack
good.
Overflow.
Yeah, Twitter's good. Stack Overflow is a good way to contact as well.
I would go with Twitter.
You would go with Twitter?
He seems active on Twitter.
He certainly does. He's very active on Twitter. And this is if you're scared of joining Twitter because you go, oh, no one's going to want to see what I had for breakfast or listen to my opinions. That's true. No one does. But all you just do, and when you use it, is you go ask the questions you want to ask and go from there. Speaking of which, Tracy Sells says she tried the SQL help hashtag on this for Twitter a couple weeks ago and didn't get any responses. So now she's going to try us. Is it possible to see the current transaction save point or name of a save point during a debugging session? I have a .NET app looping through code, and it's at a debug statement. Could I look at the SQL Server side where a transaction is and what its save point is at? She says she is a he. It's Tracy's a guy. Sorry about that, Tracy. I bet that happens all the time. That happens all the time with me. People assume
you have a fast car.
Nice.
Moments like that, our transcriptionist is now trying to rewind that going, wait, what did Richie just say?
Really, I've been doing that for 20 years with that song, by the way.
I don't think any of us have an idea on that.
Well, Richie might be able to answer the debugging side, but seeing where a transaction is, I mean, you're looking at the transaction, reading the transaction log.
I mean, are we debugging the stored procedure, or are we debugging the?
Well, I'm guessing they're doing something with begin tran and they're naming their transactions. So it's like begin tran 1, do some stuff.
Oh,
We had to roll back some stuff.
ooh, are we talking about nested transactions?
I hope not.
Ooh,
No such thing.
Yeah, that's usually a bad thing.
Oh, man, Tracy says, yes, we're doing rolling back of save points. Holy smokes, the transaction with save points. I've never used those in my life. I don't know anyone who has.
No.
So ask on dba.stackexchange.com and know that you're in a rare world of hardly anybody using those things.
That's a Better Call Saul question. There's a Solomon Rutsky on there. Rutsky, who does the C# tools. He will have an answer for you.
That's true.
Because he knows everything I don't want to know.
Larry says, I'm wanting to know your opinion of SQL Server on Linux. The reason that I'm running it is that Linux supports dynamic threading. A scheduler that has idle threads can dynamically reallocate those threads to another SQL Server or to another scheduler. This dramatically increases the performance of SQL Server on the same hardware over Windows.
Where did you paste that from?
Scroll down. Scroll
No,
down.
I mean, sounds like it came from the Linux brochure.
Yeah, I'm going to call BS on that.
Yeah.
Now, it's not that it's not possibly true. It sure totally could possibly be true. But never in the entire history of my long, illustrious career have I ever gone, dog, no, but no, I really need to move a task to a different core in order to go fast. So,
or CPU is my problem, right?
It's so rare. I mean, there are wait types where CPU is your problem, but usually it's due to single-threaded function, something causing your query to go single-threaded. At that point, it doesn't matter which scheduler you move it to, you're screwed. And if you're worried about contention between lots of queries that are all single-threaded that end up on the same core, how's about you tune your queries? Larry says, my source is deep within MS.
Oh.
There are so many.
Are you
MS? So our answer, or at least my answer, and anybody else can talk to, is I've never seen that as a problem that I needed to solve. Such a deep of a problem that I would rather change operating systems than tune the code. So there you go.
Yeah, I agree. Wow. If that's the case, then hey, great. But I've never seen that problem, and I've had databases over 60 terabytes and stuff like that, and CPU has never been a really huge issue. I mean, it's always been memory.
Let's
or lack
see.
thereof.
Or lack thereof, yeah.
Peter has a follow-up on his earlier SP Blitz index questions. He says, the new version will not allow mode 4 when specifying the table name. You don't have to with mode. Whenever you specify a table name, it already is kind of a mode 4. If you're seeing missing indexes in an older version, they may not meet the basic cost thresholds we use these days. Like it may only have a very tiny benefit and the server's been up for a year.
And from what I can remember, setting the mode was never valid with when you set a table schema or whatever name. That was always something that was not allowed or that had no effect.
Yeah.
I think we're just more verbose about it not working in newer versions.
Yeah. Robert says, hey guys, have you ever seen or heard of CheckDB? Yeah, I've held my ear up to the server a few times and heard it carefully. Cause a node in a 2-node cluster to go down and cause a failover when you're doing CheckDB. We think it's a firmware upgrade, that resource database is on C. Have you ever, and he thinks it's a CheckDB on the master database that's causing the failover. Wow.
I've never had it on master. I've had it on a regular user database.
That's true.
Which was fun. If you want this, the short story, it was we had a server with 512 gigs of RAM and with max memory set to 485 gigs. The node would crash and restart on CheckDB on a 4.5 terabyte database. With max memory set to 475 gigs, so down 10 gigs, it would go just fine. Bizarre.
Nice.
But master, no. Unless you have a 4.5 terabyte master database.
Or unless you have corruption in the master database. That's the only other thing that I can think of. It caused a severe enough server error that it would cause the server to go unresponsive. But I'm reaching in order to pull that up. And you would think it would happen on either node too.
Yeah, and also it would have to happen on either node. Mm-hmm. And like that error would bubble up somewhere. It wouldn't just be like, oh, we don't know.
Yeah, check your error log. That should show it.
Yeah.
Graham says, our server team has set up a Windows 2016 failover cluster for a network document share. I want to set up an availability group using the same cluster, but this is very concerning. In this current failover cluster, I see multiple duplicates of folders. This is kind of more detail, I think, than we can answer in a quick Q&A here. You may, and I think you're going to want to show a lot more details. Try posting this one over at Stack Exchange. I also wouldn't post this at dba.stack exchange. I would post it on
Server Fault?
Yeah, Server Fault.
Yeah.
Serverfault.com. MM says, we are rolling to SQL 2014. I don't know if that means that he's like driving along in his 5.0 listening to 2014 CD. What determines the version of SQL Server data tools that the developers need? Does it depend on what version of Visual Studio they use? I think some of our developers are still using Visual Studio 2008. I have no idea. I've never used DT in my life.
Why are they still using Visual Studio 2008?
Random potato mic. What'd you change?
Your microphone was fine until just now, and then all of a sudden it goes 100%.
Oh, I didn't change anything. Is it still bad?
Yeah. You are fully auto-tuned.
Ladies and gentlemen, Richie Rump.
Potato. Hello?
Potato. Yep.
Potato by any other name.
So Richie drops the mic. He probably should literally drop the mic. It's really amazing that in the year 2017, it's still really hard to get video conferencing working right and like a high quality. We got Elon Musk boring tunnels under LA, and we can't even get audio working right. I'd like to see Elon Musk do a podcast and see how bad he sounds.
You know what's funny is I remember back in like the old days of video conferencing, like net meeting. It either worked or it didn't. There was no in between. There was no like, oh, your camera's fuzzy. Oh, your mic sucks. Like, oh, your audio's bad. It was always like either you could connect to the meeting and it worked, or you couldn't connect to the meeting and that was it.
Yeah.
We're so analog now.
Oh man, you poor thing. So yeah, yeah, it's still bad. So we have no idea on the Visual Studio SSDT thing. For that one, I would actually either check, I would post that on SQL Help because it's short enough that you can probably get by with that. Yep. There was a session, a lightning talk at the 24 Hours of PASS last year, or at the PASS Summit last year about which versions you needed to use. And the presenter had this whole grid of stuff up on the screen. And I just remember looking at that going, God help the poor guy who has to determine that licensing. Courtney says, Even worse than regular licensing. Courtney says, in always-on availability groups, what's the difference in behavior when I say that a readable secondary allows queries or that read-only intent is on? Well, what this means is if someone connects in directly via a listener and didn't specify read-only intent, like if they try to connect directly to the database using the server name, the secondary replica name, if they didn't specify read-only intent, they're not allowed in the database. I have a lot of third-party crappy apps that don't have application intent in the connection string. Somebody maybe uses like some kind of reporting app, and I want to just let them connect to the database. I know they're only doing selects, but they don't put the read-only intent in. They wouldn't be allowed to connect. Let's see. Next up, Ronnie Jones asks, I try to only use the first names. I forgot there. Sorry, Ronnie.
That's such a good name.
That is a good, it's like a country star's name. Ronnie Jones. Next up with I lost my trailer in the flood. Ronnie says, we're moving our SQL 2012 instance from one physical box to another. The new server will assume the same name as the old server. I have a whole bunch of linked server objects. Do I need to move master across, or should I just script everything out and then reload the new master?
Ooh, I would rather script everything out. I'm not a fan of having things tag along like that. Because at least then you get to do some house cleaning, you know. You're like, do I really need this? Do I actually need this? This link server hasn't been around since 2002. Why is this name in there?
Gotcha. Larry follows up on his earlier question. He says he confirmed by testing it's a SQL Server 2012 database in 2008 compat mode, can participate in an availability group. Awesome, Larry. That's one question down. Now, we had a few more in the queue. If you can test those and let us know.
Well, that reminds me of a question that came up in the comments on the blog post earlier this week where someone asked if a database in 2012 compatibility mode could participate in direct seeding on a 2016 database. And it was like, yeah, it's like there's no good reason for that not to work because the database compatibility mode doesn't really impact the higher server functions like that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Larry says, pass them on. Robert follows up. Robert says, this cluster is showing corruption in the MS SQL system resource database. Ooh. Can that in itself cause the node to completely blue screen? If we run CheckDB on master, it actually causes the node to crash after it's launched.
Well, I want to say Paul Randall has something about how when you run CheckDB on master, it reaches out to MS SQL resource.
Yeah, automatically. When you run CheckDB on master, it immediately follows by CheckDB on the resource database. Yeah. Can that cause a blue screen? Yes. So fun trivia, this is also one of the reasons that Azure SQL DB won't just let you hand over a database and they'll restore it and run it from there. They have no checking built into SQL Server to make sure that a database won't cause the system to crash whenever it's gone and restored. So this was never a problem in on-premises because you're the one who restores your own databases. So if you choose to restore something corrupt, you're kind of on your own. Whereas up in the cloud, if you restore a database on a shared instance and you bone everybody, that wouldn't be good for their availability.
I mean, that reminds me of like when I drop off laundry. It's like, I know what's in the bag. They don't know what's in the bag. It could be anything in that bag. You see other bags in there and you don't know what was in those bags. I wouldn't want any of my laundry getting washed with what was in any of those other bags. Because I'm like terrified of those other bags.
Oh, that makes sense. So like, so if somebody has weed in there or something that the drug dogs are going to come running into your place and you're like, it's laundry.
Yeah, just something
What's
weird.
in the bag? Nice 7 reference. I like that. That was good. Kelly says, for SQL Server data tools, I think you can download the most recent community edition of Visual Studio, the most recent SSDT, and then specify the target version of SQL. We'll take your word for that, Kelly.
I believe that is true.
There comes Mr. Roboto chiming in as well. Yes.
Hello.
All right. Next up, Nestor says, when you detach and attach a database, do some properties get reset? I recently performed a detach attach and DB chaining was lost. Is this normal?
Huh.
That one and trustworthy. I know trustworthy doesn't come across with a restore. I don't think there's any others though.
Yeah, like I'm trying to, because I used to have to detach and attach databases fairly often, moving them from one drive to another. Mm-hmm. But I can't think of anything that I can't think of any weird settings that might have got lost. I know that like when I changed stuff like auto shrink and auto close, that was just gone after a detach and attach. Thanks, SP Blitz.
God, that's horrible. Let's see. And then next up, Garland says, one blogger has been blogging about moving towards data science because DBAs are getting automated away. What are your thoughts on career progressions past DBA? Is this just more hype about DBAs being phased out?
How many times has the DBA job been dead? I remember when NoSQL came out, the DBA was dead. When SQL, 2005, because it was self-tuning, the DBA was dead.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
SQL Server 2000, there were no such promises. Everyone back then was still pretty sure that the DBA was alive and kicking in some weird source code sort of way, maybe sitting in a box attached to a bunch of tubes.
And there's this weird race of automation. So like on one hand, Microsoft is racing to automate the parts of database administration that suck, which is great. I'm all for it. Managed backups was an example of that. Then on the other end, you have other teams in Microsoft racing to deploy new features, column store indexes, in-memory OLTP, R, Python. These new features don't even have instrumentation, let alone best practices, let alone any kind of automation to leverage them. So I kind of look at it as this moving sweeper, that there's always a part of Microsoft that's sweeping up the crappy stuff off the street. After all, we don't have to do a lot of performance tuning anymore on databases that are like 5 gigs or 10 gigs. That's kind of taken care of now. Your skills will always be required at the higher end of the spectrum.
I'll give a good example of something that I heard a long time ago. I heard that extended events were going to kill the DBA because anybody was going to be able to find any problem in SQL Server. And to this day, extended events are still one of the most unusable features to most people in SQL Server. It's a mess of XML, and like the GUI is weird and takes forever, and like this is not a good set of like, if you have this problem, use this extended event. Like you have to go searching to find stuff. You might use one event or another. I still get confused about what extended event does what sometimes because the names and descriptions are like one word off sometimes. You're just like, I don't know. I thought I had the right one. I'm sorry.
Richie, how many times is you've heard over the years, developers will be dead. Everything will be so easy that managers will be able to
self-writing code.
Oh, you mean like RAD?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it can be so easy. It seems like every time we get a new technology jump or a new technology, things just kind of, some things speed up, but other things slow down, right? And, I jump from one technology to another, and it just seems to take the same amount of time for me to do just maybe a little bit more stuff, but I'm able to do, it's just never the panacea that it's promised to be, right? I mean, the whole node thing, we could just write JavaScript everywhere. And everyone realized that maybe that's not such a good idea because we're writing JavaScript everywhere.
XML was a great example of this. They're like, we don't need databases anymore. Yeah. The developers can just throw XML in some kind of property bag, and they'll be able to define their own schemas. No one will need data modelers ever again. And yeah, that didn't pan out so well.
Yeah, and also we're like, XML, JSON.
Who? The question that no one really answers when they talk about that stuff happening is what happens when the automation breaks. So like, just we were talking about earlier, direct seeding in SQL Server 2016, comes along. You no longer have to worry about setting up a process that will join your databases and sync them across an availability group. But what happens when something goes wrong with direct seeding? A long time ago when it came out and I was excited about it and I was blogging about it and stuff would go wrong, it still required me to go in there and do a bunch of stuff to fix it. When it broke hard, and finding the error messages and figuring out what they meant and restarting things and kicking things back off. I had to go do that. That wasn't automated then, and I don't think it's automated now.
I have to show a screenshot too as well that I just utterly die about. In the Books Online section talking about automatic tuning, because now in Azure you get some ability to do some automatic tuning. Here's a comment that's on that post. Hey, using under automatic index management, it says new index will be retained only if performance is the queries is worse. Oh yeah, sorry about that. We'll have to go in and fix that. It's at the end of the day, that's like of all the typos they could have, that's the worst possible one. at the end of the day, it's still human beings on the other side, and this stuff will break at the same time you're trying to push the game forward.
I mean, if you go back to the actual question is the DBA moving to data science, and how much correlation is there between doing DBA work and doing data science work? I don't think there's much. I don't think there's much at all. I mean, data science is a lot of math and statistics, and you're actually writing some sort of code and query to, you know, get all the data and form the data in the right spots, and then you're actually running all of these algorithms up against it, and you have to understand, well, what's a positive, what's a false positive, and then you're making all these, seeing all this data, and then you're extrapolating information from it, giving it to an executive, well, he's going to make a business decision on it. Well, if you've done your job correctly, then that's great. But if you've done it poorly, now you've given the business executive information to make his business decision, which may tank the entire business because you didn't understand this algorithm or you did things incorrectly. I've actually worked with data scientists, and they're PhD type level people, and I was like, oh, this is really super interesting stuff. I just don't want to stake my career on what you're doing because you went to school for 12 years to understand all the math behind all this stuff. And I want to know if I'm going to give this information and say that it's right, I want to know that it's right. And for me to know that's right, I have to understand all that algorithm and all that math and all that stuff. And I'm like, I'm interested in it, but I'm not going to go move my career that way.
And if anyone's ever seen a DMV query, we all know that DBAs hate math.
As a matter of fact, I've been looking at DMV queries all week.
And I will say too, so you asked like what's the career progression of DBA. This one person chose to go off and do data science. You can. So this is one of the things I love about database administration. You're in the center of the business. You can go in any direction you choose. If you don't like database administration and you want to go do something else, for example, that blogger, they might be just done with database administration and they may choose to go off and do something else. The world is your oyster as a DBA. You could become a developer, an architect, a consultant, data scientist, almost anything. The one thing that I'd be careful with data science is if you don't have a real college degree and you're going up against people who do, just know that that's going to be a real tough market. There's a long difference, as any of you who've ever hired a DBA know, there's a long difference between a Microsoft certification and something like a professional degree when it comes time to take it seriously. There was a brief rush during the dot-com rush in the early 2000s where anyone with an MCSE could get an amazing job at great rates. That's true today in data science. If you can spell data science, you can probably get a pretty good job. I don't know that that's going to be true a few years from now. All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us today at Office Hours, and we'll see you all next week on Office Hours. Adios.